Part 95. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 943. Zhang Zizai knew very well what the tenfold bigger calamity cloud meant. He could only give a bitter smile, for he knew that the Annihilation Calamity and the Burning Heart Calamity that Xuanhuan faced were already among the top 3 divine calamities. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. 10 times bigger, the divine calamity that Ming is facing is absolutely unprecedented, and I am afraid that no one in the world can compare to it. He estimated that there have not been many such divine calamities in the history of the God realm. However, Zhang Zizai was not worried. At least after becoming a god, his mental will had been reversed, and he had experienced such a thrilling process. When the divine calamity came, his mentality was already very peaceful. No matter what kind of calamity it was, he only needed to know that he had no fear at all. Now, at least in his heart, he was already strong enough to be unmatched. He could look down on the tenfold calamity cloud. He had no idea what kind of divine tribulation this was, and had never heard of it. In the distance, Lu Dingxing had already started, and they were not disturbed. The process of blood reversal was continuing. Seeing that the situation over there was relatively stable, Zhang Zizai felt more at ease to bear this almost unprecedented divine tribulation. At this time, the tribulation clouds in the sky had turned into 9 colors, and the 9 colors were arranged in the 9 palaces. Each tribulation cloud exuded a terrifying aura. There were 9 in total, and each one was as big as the tribulation cloud of Xuanhuan's Annihilation Thunder Tribulation. He felt that he might have to bear more than 9 divine tribulations, and each divine tribulation was equivalent to the Annihilation Thunder Tribulation. But in fact, he was still a little more serious. At this time, it was obvious that all the tribulation clouds were linked, so they might not come up one after another, but descend at the same time, and the power of the 9 nines returning to 1, and the power of the explosion when combined together was much more terrifying than descending one after another. He didn't know what others would feel when facing such tribulation clouds. Anyway, he was in awe and full of fighting spirit to change his fate. Becoming a god was originally a journey to change his fate. After the calamity cloud appeared, some illusions began to appear in front of his eyes. Zhang Zizai probably knew that the physical calamity and the soul calamity came at the same time. The confusion that began to arise in his mind must be related to the soul calamity. Before the physical calamity came, the ground in front of him, his own state, memory, and emotions seemed to be changing. This strong shock showed that his soul calamity was not simple. The physical calamity and soul calamity below were always matched, so when the physical calamity was so terrifying, the soul calamity was definitely unprecedented at the same level. God calamity is like this. Not only does it destroy the physical body, but it also weakens the soul. Only by completely holding on can you have a real divine body and soul. Otherwise, Zhang Zizai, who only has the source of the gods, cannot be regarded as a real ancient god. He is not a real ancient god, but he can defeat Ji Yingying, who is at the level of ancient gods, which is enough to show his strength. If it were not for this, the Lord of the Eternal Night would be on guard and would not underestimate Zhang Zizai, resulting in them now being able to search like headless flies. The only hidden danger is that Zhang Zizai's movement in this divine calamity is so huge that it may alarm the entire divine domain to a certain extent, which may allow the Lord of Yanjai and others to find this place quickly. This will inevitably affect Lingxian and others. But Zhang Zizai didn't have these in his mind. He could only face this unprecedented divine calamity with the will of the opposite and a truly noble state of mind. Before the soul calamity came, the physical calamity of the 9-color calamity cloud above his head came down with a bang. A total of 9 kinds of calamities suddenly appeared. Zhang Zizai took a look and felt depressed. The Lord really thinks highly of me. 9 kinds of calamities are actually the top 9 divine calamities. The reason why he recognized it was because the Annihilation Thunder calamity that Xuanhuan had endured was among them, and the Annihilation Thunder calamity was only a part of it. The other 8 calamities were almost at the same level as the Annihilation Thunder calamity, and some were even stronger. These 9 divine calamities came at the same time, and it was impossible to imagine how shocking and terrible it was. For example, the white flame is called the holy fire tribulation. The holy fire burns and transcends the ordinary into a saint. However, during the burning process, the pain endured by the flesh and blood is terrifying. For example, the hurricane tribulation, all of which are sharp blades, cutting in the internal organs, shattering the flesh countless times. Only those who are not strong-willed can persevere. For example, the cold water tribulation, the cold water flows through the blood vessels and flows through the whole body, which can definitely kill people with cold. And the piercing gold tribulation, that is a real spike, piercing in the flesh and blood, drilling through the whole body like a meat grinder. These 9 tribulations, ordinary ancient gods cannot encounter any of them. Basically, only talented young men who have a god-level totem in advance can have a certain hope of encountering one, and no one will encounter 2. However, what Zhang Zizai needs to endure now is 9 kinds of divine tribulations, which fall on his flesh at the same time. The bitterness at that moment can be shocking, and weeping ghosts and gods. Thunder rips, holy fire burns, when the heat reaches its extreme, cold water descends, when the cold and heat alternate, the disaster suffered by the flesh and blood is beyond imagination. Then other disasters such as wind, earth, gold, wood, etc. are added, which can make life worse than death. The horror of this disaster is that it has almost exceeded the limit of pain. At that moment, Zhang Zizai was stunned. He felt that he was dead, but when he looked down, his body was still in torture. Such a divine disaster can only prove that I am still different and better than everyone else. Zhang Zizai's will is different. Now is the time in his life when his fighting spirit is strongest. Even defeating Ji Yingying is a bit unsatisfying. He has shifted his focus of fighting to the divine calamity. Now he is not afraid of death. God, there is no trick to calamity. After destroying Zhang Zizai's body, they will be repaired and become stronger through constant destruction and rebirth. Those who endure divine calamity only need to do one thing, and that is to hold on. This sounds easy, but it is actually very difficult. Almost a quarter of the people who became gods in God's domain failed this level and were wiped out. That's because the physical body can withstand the calamity, but the soul calamity is sometimes unbearable. Moreover, when the soul calamity and the body calamity come together, it will also affect the fighting spirit, and even affect the state of mind, defeating a person from the heart, thus directly losing the physical calamity. Resistance. While Zhang Zizai was still enduring the crazy physical calamity, the soul calamity came quietly. Everything in front of him was constantly changing. In the blur, someone was asking himself, if you could go through life again, what would you do? Are you leaving? Zhang Zizai couldn't answer. His mind quickly fell into chaos. His body seemed to be out of control. Even his memories were disappearing. At some point, he seemed to have forgotten everything and his whole body was as white as ashes. Paper, looking blankly at the hand in front of me. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 944. When he lowered his head, he could still see the 9 kinds of physical tribulations on his body. The pain was so profound, but he could miraculously ignore it, as if it was a trivial matter. Everything in front of him became clear, and he stared blankly at a huge pillar in front of him, which was the pillar of origin. He seemed to be a passerby, looking at everything in front of him, and suddenly there was laughter. He looked around, and many people were laughing. Those people were a little strange, but they immediately became familiar. Sure enough, the prince is 15 years old, but he still can't get his natal totem. Reduced to a mortal insect, haha. It's a shame for the Zhang Palace. King Zilan actually gave birth to such a waste. It's really retribution. This murderous devil really paid the price. It's still too early. Zhang Zizai felt a little uncomfortable. He seemed to be a passerby, but those words made him so uncomfortable, as if his heart was dug out, displayed in the middle, and everyone spit on it. Mortal insect, a 9-year-old child stuck out his tongue in front of him, looking proud, pointing at his head, and said, "See, my totem, are you envious? But you have no hope in your life." It seems that he is a little envious. In a trance, he saw the disappointed look in the woman's eyes. She did not show it, but patted his shoulder. "It's okay, go back." But Zhang Zizai knew how disappointed she was. He felt uncomfortable for the second time. This feeling was very tragic. He wanted to watch all this, but the reality seemed not to be like this. There was always a sword stabbing him. He was confused, like a walking corpse, moving forward dully. One day he saw the boy, he looked at him with contempt, and said, "Mortal insect, are you still embarrassed to come out and embarrass yourself?" "Monkey," Zhang Zizai said 2 words in this body. "Shut up." The young man slapped himself hard, and he was dizzy. He said, "From now on, if you call me like this again, I will beat you every time I see you." Someone was laughing nearby. It seemed to be Zhang Junduo and others. Zhang Zizai felt a little powerless. After all, he couldn't control his body. He was just watching a play, but the uncomfortable feeling seemed to be heartbreaking. One time, it seemed to be the Kailan Club. He sat in the corner and watched the young man beat the heroes and became the first in the Kailan Club. The young man named Lu Dingxing beside him was directly disabled. His eyes were extremely miserable, but he had no choice. Zhang Zizai's heart was hit by swords again, but this was just the beginning. Then it seemed that someone came back from Yanlongxiu. He hid in the corner and watched his sister and mother being controlled by others, but he was powerless. The despair was like falling into the deep sea, unable to breathe, and like hanging himself. He wanted to roar, but found that his throat was hoarse. He could only hide and watch them being ridiculed, as if the man named Zhang Zhengzi was going to marry his sister directly, and the wedding date had been set, and his mother had nothing to say. He searched in despair, because he vaguely remembered that the beautiful woman might appear, and she would definitely take him out of the sea of suffering. That time he met her, she passed by him, and Zhang Zizai stood in front of her with difficulty. At that moment, she actually looked at him coldly and then passed by. When Zhang Zizai chased her, he was slapped away by her. When he got up, she was gone. He vaguely remembered that Juxian seemed to say something when she left. Where did this waste come from? How dare you block my way? In this way, Zhang Zizai lost her from then on. He was still sinking in the sea of despair, sinking to the endless depths, suffocating in despair all the time, and couldn't die even if he wanted to. He walked forward like a corpse. Not long after, her sister got married. On the night after the wedding, before the groom entered, she hanged herself in the bridal chamber and was burned directly by a fire. She didn't even have time to see her corpse. It was as if his mother was crying. Countless such scenes piled up together. He felt the sea all over his body, as if there was water all around him, just like a sea of suffering. Is it not over yet? Life seems to have no meaning. He keeps drinking the water of the sea of suffering. Is there an end to despair? Living like this will only lead to endless disasters. That day, he stood on the Huangguo gate of Yanlongxiu, mixed with some people in the market, and watched a young man named Zhang Junjian being pushed out. Then, under the hand of Nangongke, the head fell to the ground. His head rolled several times, and his eyes suddenly saw Zhang Zizai on the Huangguo gate. He smiled, but Zhang Zizai's feet were shaking. He wanted to scream, but his throat seemed to be stuck and he couldn't make any sound at all. His body was in great pain. He looked down and found that there were flames, thunder, ice, storms, and lightning on his body. These things engulfed his body and kept biting him, like 9 wild beasts. In the pain, someone suddenly appeared. Zhang Zizai looked and found that it was a man and a woman. He was so familiar with them. Aren't they his parents? Has he finally appeared? It was a great battle. The Flame Dragon Emperor and the princes and ministers fought against the couple. The battle was very tragic. Zhang Zizai longed for victory and longed for the injustice of the desolate past to be redressed, but the result did not develop as he expected. It seems that my father was not what he imagined. He was defeated. He knelt before the Yanlong Emperor in front of everyone and admitted that he had indeed accepted the benefits of Xiaoming Kingdom, betrayed the Yanlong dynasty, and killed hundreds of thousands of people. It was himself. A worthy death. In grief and anger, the Yanlong Emperor killed his brothers himself, as if his mother had committed suicide beside him, and everything was dead. But the common people clapped their hands and applauded. For a moment, the applause was like thunder, and like a violent storm of blades, Zhang Zizai was pierced through the heart by 10,000 swords. I remember that my brother has a son. Is he nearby? Someone recognized Zhang Zizai and sent him to the Yanlong Emperor. Zhang Zizai looked at this man with a pale face. You are young and owe money, so you are not guilty, but it is a pity that you do not have a totem. Otherwise, I would have made you the New Zealand king. Now I can only give you a title and enjoy eternal salary. Go back. Is this a reward? If I were you, I'd forget about committing suicide. Suddenly a girl spoke in front of her. She seemed to be Wei-er, but her eyes were so cold. She stared at herself again and said, a complete waste, a useless mortal Joan, the whole family is a sinner, and now they are all dead. What's the point of living now that you are the only one left? I'll give you a knife and commit suicide. She handed a blade to Zhang Zizai with a smile on her face. Life is so miserable, death is the only relief. You are destined to be guilty in this life. Let's see if you are lucky in the next life. Don't be born into such a sinful family. The girl who had always played with him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 945. Is this liberation? Zhang Zizai lowered his head and looked at his body, where flames burned, thunder shone, and ice froze. Next to him was Zhang Junjian's head, the corpses of his parents, and 100,000 bloody corpses on the waste gate. The imperial martial sect disappeared, and he stood in the deserted pass. 100,000 corpses piled up into a mountain. He stood at the highest position of the corpse mountain and the sea of blood, watching the corpses scattered all over the field, and the blood flowed into rivers. Such blood color, even the sky stained red. In this life, it's hard to understand your sins. Only death can put them to rest and allow you to escape from the sea of suffering and have a new voice. Don't be a waste in the next life. The touching woman is right in front of you. She is like this. She was beautiful. Zhang Zizai was familiar with every inch of her body, but at this moment, she was looking at him so coldly. Mom, who is he? Suddenly a girl appeared, looking at her with disgust, as if she were a belle. A sinful and lowly person has no other way out except death, Juxian said coldly. Did he kill all these people? Is he an evil devil? Lingdang asked. Juxian nodded. Then you'd better die a simpler death so that you can make amends to these kind people. Lingdang smiled. Die. Juxian pointed to the knife in Zhang Zizai's hand. Death, devil. The bell rang. Hurry up and die. Shen Xiao also stood beside him. You can be freed only when you die. Lingxian also died, her eyes were cold. Brother, I'm going to take the first step. There was another person behind her. It turned out to be you. She also had a knife in her hand, which was inserted into her chest. Blood gurgled out, and she looked at herself with a smile, looking relieved. Zhang Zizai, your existence is just a joke. You are a waste who can't do anything. Your parents and brothers are guilty, and you are just a playboy. In the past 15 years, you have done nothing but humiliate them. Now if your whole family is a dead soul, what dignity do you have, living in this world? You will die early and be reborn. The woman who made him think about it day and night had a sarcastic smile. Zhang Zizai's hands were trembling, and he held the knife against his chest. It seemed that he finally felt more comfortable at that moment. Only death could provide relief. Those flames, thunder, and storms were extremely gorgeous, as if they were commemorating their own death. When he dies, we will go find Daddy. The bell was held in Zhu Xian's arms. Your father is tens of millions of times better than this kind of trash. He is just a wretch. At this time 9 immortals looked down upon him. Hurry up, the bell can't wait any longer. The girl looked at him with a sneer. This smile was also a sharp blade. In fact, he didn't even have to commit suicide. He was already riddled with holes. All this made Zhang Zizai take a deep breath. Suddenly, he smiled. The smile was shocking, the smile was magnificent and domineering. I know that you are the calamity of my soul. You did almost kill me and almost annihilate me completely. But I, Zhang Zizai, am destined to be immortal. At this level, you can destroy hundreds of millions of people in the world. But you can't kill me. Is the calamity of his soul terrible? Zhang Zizai admitted that it was so terrifying to be so real and create such a sea of suffering for himself that it would make one's scalp numb. He tried to commit suicide countless times, proving this soul calamity, and came close to killing himself countless times. However, he is stronger than ever, and his spiritual will is strong enough. When he became a god, the dignity, freedom, and protection he longed for made him already see through this conflict. He knew what the meaning of cultivation was, so this might be a soul calamity that even the gods could not survive, but with a loud laugh, everything in front of him disappeared into thin air. With a bang, the soul calamity was destroyed first, and the 9 immortals, Bells, Shenxiao and Lingxian in front of them all collapsed. At that moment, his divine soul grew unprecedentedly, transforming directly from a semi-divine soul into a divine soul. From a void soul, it directly condensed into an entity in the natal sea. It was a 9-color shining divine soul, sitting in that natal sea. Above the totem, the light shines. He didn't know what other people's souls were like, but at this moment, his own soul was vast and majestic, domineering and eternal. He felt that the power of his soul exceeded the limit of his imagination. Everything around him seemed to be under his control. For example, even though he was still surrounded by numerous calamity clouds, he saw Lu Dingxing's side. What he saw was that Ji Yingying was screaming in despair, wailing every moment. The blood she had received was extracted bit by bit at this time and returned to Lingxuan's body. This was the real pain, so her screams were inhumane. Zhang Zizai even saw that the gifts that originally belonged to Ji Yingying were being transferred at this time, her blood was also being taken away, and even the totem was disintegrating, as if it was about to degenerate. Totems can degenerate. Most of her blood and talents have now been transferred to Lingxian. From this moment on, after going through a miserable process, Ji Yingying has been reduced to a useless person. As a result, even her snow-white skin has begun to age. The plump and tempting figure also began to become shriveled. Zhang Zizai didn't think how miserable this was. Some people do evil, and sooner or later they have to pay the same price. This is called karma. If she hadn't treated Lingxian like that, she wouldn't have ended up like this today. When she took Lingxuan's, when it comes to blood, it must be artificial and joyful. Sooner or later, you will pay for what you have done. This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Her despair and trembling at this moment were all given to herself. Who made her unlucky to provoke Zhangzai? At this moment, even the Lord of the Eternal Night could not protect her. Although it was a pity to see her wrinkled figure, it was caused by sin and was not worth regretting. Zhangzai's soul was unprecedentedly powerful, and his will was tenacious and eternal, difficult to shake. After experiencing the forging of the soul calamity, the transformation that took place was really terrible. It was a soul calamity that not many people in the world could survive. The divine calamity was a double-edged sword. The more powerful the divine calamity, the easier it was to kill people, but once it was survived, the benefits obtained were even more terrifying. Zhangzai survived this cruel soul calamity. His soul absolutely surpassed all the ancient gods who had just become gods, and his inner quality was also unparalleled in the world. At this time, the physical calamity was still going on, still tearing and reorganizing his body crazily, but it was useless. Zhangzai's will was already terrible enough. The severe pain in the physical body brought by these divine calamities was nothing compared to the double pain of the physical body and soul just now. After experiencing a more tragic disaster, the disaster suddenly eased and no longer had any lethality. Now, Zhangzai only needed to let nature take its course and get through this physical calamity, and everything would be over. His godhood was completely secure. The current physical calamity was just the unparalleled divine body after forging his soul. From now on, he was almost an ancient god, and Ji Yingying, who had just become an ancient god, was now a cripple. Lingxian had also recovered, and even after absorbing Ji Yingying's blood, her talent had grown. Everything was settled. Everything on Zhangzai was like a gorgeous firework. He looked at the flames in his palm and suddenly smiled in the calamity cloud. From now on, I will embark on the path of divine cultivation, just for eternity. That is the will of the King of Gods. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 946. Zhangzai didn't know how many people he had alarmed by his tribulation. Two groups of people appeared not far away. The group in front came from the eternal night star sea. At this moment, they finally saw the divine tribulation cloud that covered the ground. But at this moment, they were suffocated. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. What kind of tribulation cloud is this, so huge? Xingzia God was shocked. They were attracted by the terrifying aura of divine tribulation, but they didn't expect it to be so serious. Thunder tribulation, holy fire tribulation, thorn gold tribulation, cold water tribulation, a total of 9 kinds of divine tribulation, all of which are the top divine tribulations. Another god was stunned. 9 people are going through the tribulation here. No, there is only one person, it should be Zhangzai. People found that the face of the eternal night star lord was miserable. She sped up and seemed to have gone crazy. They saw the calamity cloud, but it would take some time to get there. Star Lord, do you know what kind of divine calamity this is? Xingzia God Lord asked weakly. This is the 9 extreme divine calamity. There is also a soul calamity. After surviving it, a god is born. The voice of the Star Lord of Eternal Night trembled. God! God! For a moment, they all lost their voices. The god in the legend actually exists. It's impossible. Can Zhangzai become a god? What exactly is a god? Some god lords didn't even know. God is the embodiment of the strongest qualifications among the ancient gods. It is a life that surpasses all ancient gods. The potential of God is at least a true God King, and can even surpass God King and achieve eternal life and immortality. There are legends of God in the God realm, but for at least 1,000,000 years, there has been no news of any God. Xingzia God Lord shivered. At least they are all true God Kings, and can even surpass God Kings, immortal. How terrible this is, everyone in the eternal night star sea knows, and they suddenly feel very uncomfortable. because they know that when Zhang Zizai survives the divine calamity, it may be useless for them to catch up. They might have offended an unimaginable genius that has not been born in a million years. On the other side, even the God King was speechless. 9 extreme divine tribulations. It can achieve the 9 extreme divine body. One soul tribulation can forge a divine soul, a double talent. This is the potential of a god. An immortal god. This guy, is he exaggerating to this extent? Are you your childhood sweetheart? The Holy Emperor trembled directly and caught Shen Xiao to ask. Saint Master, is he awesome? Shen Xiao was still worried about Ling Xian, and when she saw the performance of the Holy Emperor, she was completely stunned. Is this awesome? This is abnormal. Damn, the vision of the God King. I kneel down. The Holy Emperor trembled for a while, and the whole person was in an absolutely excited state. The King of the Gods looked at Suyuixi, coughed, and said, well, it's not impossible to be a concubine, but you still need to have a certain status. It's better to have a child to stabilize your status. Suyuixi felt that she was dreaming. Was this what her upright and strict father said? Before she could react, the 2 quasi-gods accelerated directly and led everyone to surpass the Lord of the Eternal Night and his people. Zhang Zizai seemed to have not succeeded yet, so they had to hurry up to ensure that today's plan was completely successful. God potential, it's really a miracle, Yu Shenjun sighed. He had seen the boy who was reborn in the fire in the calamity cloud. At this time, the endless calamity cloud seemed to be swallowed by his body. It seemed that his 9 extreme divine body was about to succeed. This was a divine body with divine potential, and it was not the same concept as the ordinary ancient god body. Zhang Zizai knew better than anyone that the strength of the 9 extreme divine body was perhaps not reflected in the current combat power, but in a transcendent level of life. It felt as if he had directly transformed from a mortal into a god, and gods were the life level above the ancient gods. For comparison, if mortals were mosquitoes and ancient gods were cats, then he was like a young tiger now. He might be as big as a cat now, and might even be mistaken for a cat, but his limit was to be the overlord of the jungle, directly transforming from a mosquito into a tiger. The leap of life was unprecedented. All the calamity clouds were swallowed into his body. The 9 extreme divine body was finally worthy of his source of destruction and the soul whose name he did not yet know. At this time, he was already a real god. The calamity clouds had disappeared. He had not had the chance to experience his current power. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Ling Xian and the others. Everything here is over. In his eyes, Ling Xian has become even more charming. Her temperament is unparalleled, like a rose in the dark, quiet and noble. Thank you, she smiled with a pursed mouth, a little shy, but also with some unforgettable affection. You're welcome, Zhang Zizai also smiled. She may have been blessed in disguise, and so did he. The 2 of them only needed a smile, and their hearts were already connected. Maybe all this should be thanked to Ji Yingying. However, Zhang Zizai still pinched her neck and lifted up the girl who looked like an old woman. Her eyes were grey and she looked at herself dully, like a fool. Hee hee. Ji Yingying smiled foolishly, and 2 saliva dripped down. She reached out and played with Zhang Zizai's hair, then put it in her mouth and ate it, humming, delicious, the noodles are delicious. Perhaps, after that reversal process, seeing Zhang Zizai reach such a glorious level again, a thread in her heart had broken. Now she is a fool. You are the most angry opponent I have ever encountered, and you deserve everything you get. Zhang Zizai looked at her, and she smiled at herself dully, and said, Mother, I want to eat milk. Milk, don't eat noodles. She was hopeless, her heart was dead, and she couldn't bear it anymore. There was only pain in her existence. Keeping her alive is torture for her. Zhang Zizai took a deep breath and said, rest in peace. In the next life, be a good person. She stretched out her hand and pinched it, and there was a click, and her neck was broken. The breath has disappeared. At the same time, two groups of people appeared here and saw the limp Ji Yingying in Zhang Zizai's hands. When he raised his head, he happened to meet the eyes of Lord Yanjai. Today's update is a bit late. It's because the lunatic spent a lot of effort trying to write this paragraph well. Looking back, I found that this soul calamity is quite scary. Sometimes life can indeed make people despair. However, you must persist, there is always hope, there is no obstacle that cannot be overcome. Come on together. I hope my book can make everyone feel positive energy. We all need to be good people with a clear conscience. Please bookmark this site to read the latest. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 947. Starting from the last movement of Zhang Zizai's hand, Ji Yingying's story may have ended. Of course, her soul is not dead yet, and she may still have a chance to be reincarnated. But that was no longer the scope of Zhang Zizai's consideration. He didn't need to kill the soul, so after sending Ji Yingying back to the west as promised, he had already let go. Lord Yanjai Star had already arrived, and she was late. Zhang Zizai led Lu Dingxing and Lingxian back. One step away from the fallen Ji Yingying, Dushan King and the others understood, and immediately came around to join Zhang Zizai and the others. Now the eyes of the God King and the Holy Emperor looking at Zhang Zizai were completely different. Zhang Zizai was a little surprised. How could these divine kings and quasi-divine kings look at him with such shocked eyes? There is even a feeling of admiration among them. Anyway, it felt like they were in awe of themselves. Isn't it just becoming a god? For those of them who have long been ancient gods, they have just become gods, so there is no need for them to look at themselves as the unparalleled center of attention. Only Shen Xiao asked hurriedly, "Hurry, have you succeeded?" She held Lingxuan's hand nervously, her hands trembling with nervousness before the answer was revealed. Of course it was successful. The panda's work is absolutely appropriate, ensuring that Yanner will be active in the future, Zhang Zizai said with a smile. To be honest, he was still a little uncomfortable with so many gods looking at him with admiration. Not only was it successful, but Ji Yingying's information was also transferred to her, Lu Dingxing said. Zhang Zizai didn't watch that process very carefully, but it could make Ji Yingying go crazy, so how could he feel better? Wow, she felt relieved, hugging Lingxian and crying non-stop. In the end, Lingxian had to comfort her to calm her down. And Zhang Zizai paid more attention to the situation on the Yanjai Star Sea. When he had just evacuated, the Yanjai Star Lord had already hugged Ji Yingying. She seemed to have kept Ji Yingying's soul, and the Yanjai Star Sea's people surrounded her, and it was unclear what her expression was for a while, but King Du Shen's face quickly became serious, and he said to 11 He Shenjun, "You can take the young man out immediately." Yes, 11 and Shenjun took action immediately, and a glazed pagoda appeared in her hand. Before Zhang Zizai and the others could react, they were sucked in by the glazed pagoda. When they entered the space inside the pagoda, it could be said that it was magnificent, but it was not completely closed, because the glazed pagoda still had a window. The young people immediately gathered at the window to watch what was going on outside. "Why are you so nervous?" Suqinyu asked. "The anger shown by Lord Yanjai towards Ji Yingying's death was a bit beyond my father's expectations," Su Yuexi said. "Therefore, to be on the safe side, he protected the young people first, because if there was a violent conflict at their level, the young people mixed in would be easily destroyed. I can tell, Lord Yanjai Star must want to kill you." Shen Xiao was slightly nervous. "Don't worry, my father will protect him," Su Yuexi said proudly. "It's amazing to have a father," Shen Xiao said. Humph, Su Yuexi raised her chin. "This jealous look is really elegant and refined." There was already a tense confrontation outside. When Zhang Zizai saw the shocking evil aura of the people outside in the Evernight Star Sea through the window, he knew that today's matter was not over yet. Is the death of a talented disciple worthy of Master Yanjai Star's current expression? He saw Master Yanjai Star among the crowd. This beautiful woman was extremely gloomy at this time. When her face became gloomy, her whole body the sky was almost dim. Looking back, he found that Xuanhuan, Suyuexi, Shen Xiao and others were all looking at him with some admiration. Zhang Zizai smiled and said, "What are your expressions? You are fascinated by my handsomeness, are you, especially you Qinyu, brother? I have no interest in men. Brother Zhang, the 9 ultimate divine tribulation and the 1 soul tribulation have created your 9 ultimate divine body and 1 divine soul. The total is your divine potential. Don't you know?" Xuanyu asked in an amazed tone. He was usually quite calm, but now his eyes showed absolute recognition and respect for Zhang Zizai. "You and I are the same, just call him boss," Lu Dingxing said. Although this title is a bit funny, and he feels like the leader in the cottage, but he has become accustomed to it and has long been unable to change it. When they were playing around together, Zhang Zizai was his leader. "Haha, I'll adapt," Xuanyu said. He was still waiting for Zhang Zizai's response. "You all know what kind of disaster I've been through?" "I don't even know," Zhang Zizai asked curiously. Xuanyu described the previous description to the God King and the others. Zhang Zizai was surprised when he realized that such legendary divine potential had never appeared in a million years. He actually had such potential, he thought he was just a little better than the best. "I didn't expect it to be so much higher." "It's absolutely true, so you did a great job this time. Not only did you save Yan'er, you also gained and transformed yourself." Shen Xiao's eyes filled with tears. Lingxian didn't say much. She listened quietly. Only when Zhang Zizai looked at her did she smile slightly. "I understand, my handsomeness has risen to a new level," Zhang Zizai said. "Shameless," Suyuexi said contemptuously. The atmosphere was relaxed, but the situation outside was tense. Zhang Zizai saw that the eyes of the eternal night star lord outside the glazed pagoda were a little red. Her eyes seemed to be full of stars, but now they were all dyed blood red. She said to the Du Shenwang and the Holy Emperor, "You too, he killed Yingying and must pay the price. Please don't stop me. Regardless of whether he is the person chosen by the God King, I must make him pay the price today. Please think twice and don't underestimate my determination." Her tone was very calm, but as opponents who had been familiar with each other for countless years, the Du Shenwang and the others knew the meaning of her words. "Star Lord, you and I both know who is right and who is wrong in this matter. Zhang Zizai did something that none of us expected, but from a moral point of view, I think Xingai should admit defeat." "Why are you doing this? Besides, he now has the potential to be a god, and will be valued by the God King. You and I both know that it is even more meaningless to continue like this. It is better to quit while you are ahead," the God King said politely. This is from his point of view. After all, the behavior of the Star Lord Yanjai this time has already failed, and Ji Yingying has also paid the price of his life. Zhang Zizai soared because they admitted that they had failed this time. It is meaningless to force a trial on Zhang Zizai. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 948. It's a pity for a talented disciple, but it seems a bit strange to blame the God King for his fault. The Holy Emperor had long suspected that something was wrong. But the Lord of Eternal Night lowered his head, and his whole body was extremely gloomy. As opponents of the same level, they all knew what the Lord of Eternal Night was like now, and she was almost ready to fight. For a talented disciple of Xingai, she attacked the other 2 quasi-god kings, just to kill another talented disciple? This seems to be something that people at the quasi-god king level should not do. Before this incident, the God King and the Holy Emperor did not take action, but just backed up Zhang Zizai. From any angle, the Lord of Eternal Night's current behavior is inappropriate. But she really did this, and brought other god kings of Eternal Night Zingai to oppress her. In that case, don't blame me for being rude, the Lord of Eternal Night said in a cold voice. Zhang Zizai was depressed when he heard this. This seems a bit unreasonable, right? Star-Lord, it looks like Ji Yingying is not the descendant of the Star-Lord, but your biological daughter, the Holy Emperor suddenly said. How is that possible? The Star-Lord has a daughter, which should be a happy thing for everyone. Why hide her identity? Du Xuanhuan shook his head. He had 2 daughters in a row, so he naturally knew the joy. With their status, how could they hide the identity of their daughters? Besides, I remember that the Star-Lord is not married yet, Du Xuanhuan added. Is it over? The Star-Lord of Eternal Night looked at them coldly and said, shut up if you're done. She actually scolded the 2 quasi-god kings. What's more exaggerated is that she actually came directly to the God Lord's eye at this time. The other gods seemed to want to take action and join forces to stop the 2 quasi-god kings. The Eternal Night Star Sea does have a lot of people, and in a short period of time, there is a great advantage in numbers. Are you serious? Du Xuanhuan was really a little surprised. For the sake of the disciples' affairs, they fought at this level, which was simply laughable. Is it unnecessary? As a person from the Wangchuan Sword Tomb, Tai and Jun really couldn't understand why the Star-Lord of Eternal Night was going to challenge 4 sects now. It's simply sick. Duan Mulian also sneered. But they really suppressed it, and the Star-Lord of Eternal Night completely set his sights on the glazed pagoda in the hands of the God Lord's eye. At that moment, the Star-Lord of Eternal Night really took action. The battle at the level of the God Lord was too far away for Zhang Zizai, and he was also a little confused. But what was even more confusing was that at this moment, a black hole with a diameter of about 1 foot suddenly appeared beside the God Lord's eye. A hand instantly stretched out from the black vortex and suddenly grabbed the glazed pagoda in the hands of the God Lord's eye. The God Lord's eye was shaken away by a palm, and when he reacted, the glazed pagoda had disappeared. Who? The God Kings were shocked and shouted hurriedly. It was a bit too incredible for things to progress to this extent. This hand that suddenly appeared was able to snatch the glazed pagoda next to the King of Du and the Holy Emperor. What kind of strength and identity is this? It is even more difficult to guess, and there is no way to explain it. At least the King of Du believes that with his familiarity with the Lord of Eternal Night, even the Lord of Eternal Night himself would definitely not be able to do this. The method that suddenly broke through the space of heaven and earth and stretched out his hand to the side of the God of Zai was absolutely incredible. Even they found it incredible, let alone Zhang Zizai in the glazed pagoda. He happened to see the big hand from the window. In just a moment, the stars moved directly. He clearly felt that the surroundings had become completely cold. This glazed pagoda was no longer under the control of the God of Zai. Who on earth is your excellency? The King of Gods stared at a black dot in the space ahead. The black dot instantly turned into thick smoke, and in an instant, it turned into a young man with black hair and black eyes. His skin was a little dark, but his eyes were very bright. This person was definitely very scary. He appeared silently, as if he was one with the entire land, quietly and silently. Even the King of Gods and his companions still found it difficult to sense his presence. When he appeared, the faces of the King of Gods and his companions instantly became a little ugly. With their realm, they naturally knew very well that there was only one other person in the entire God realm who could approach them silently like this black-haired young man, and even after appearing, they still couldn't figure out his whereabouts. That was the King of Gods in the God realm. Could this person in front of him also be a real God King? With the eyes of the King of Gods and his companions, of course, they could see at a glance what level of terrible and powerful this black-haired young man was, but the key was that this was the God King's place, so how could such a being similar to the God King appear? At this time, he was holding the glazed pagoda in his hand, looking at everyone with cold eyes. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and pulled Zhang Zizai out of the glazed pagoda. After pulling it out, he threw the glazed pagoda directly, and Zai God hurried to catch it below. Zhang Zizai also looked at the black-haired young man in a daze. He couldn't move at all now, just like a stone floating in front of the black-haired young man. He looked at himself indifferently, and then said to the Lord of Eternal Night, "He killed Yingying. It's him. You have to avenge her." The Lord of Eternal Night said with red eyes. Well, the potential of God, incredible, it shouldn't appear in the God's domain. But it happens to be the potential of God, so you can take it slowly. The so-called slow means that his revenge is not to kill directly, but a slow, eternal torture process. So he continued, if you can survive the 9 extreme divine tribulations and 1 soul tribulations, you can probably withstand some of my methods. This almost sentenced Zhang Zizai to death, and it was a very tragic death sentence. Zhang Zizai never expected that he would suddenly face such a desperate situation of life and death even though he was protected in the glazed pagoda. This life has been full of ups and downs, which is simply too exciting. It is exciting, but the key is that it seems to be over now. Facing this suddenly appeared black-haired young man, the Du Shenhuang and the Holy Emperor frowned deeply. They did not dare to act rashly. The Du Shenhuang asked, "Who are you, sir? You are not one of us. With your strength, you have no right to enter here, let alone manage our affairs. Please leave quickly." "Ha. Next time, I will teach you a lesson." The black-haired young man controlled Zhang Zizai. He glanced at the Du Shenhuang and the others coldly, and then looked at the Eternal Night Star Lord. Until he faced her, his eyes were gentler and he said, "It's too late, just a little bit short, it's really a pity, you should be more sad." Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 949. It's okay, you go quickly. Don't let him die easily. The Lord of the Eternal Night looked at Zhang Zizai coldly. "Give me Yingying's soul." The black-haired man stretched out his hand, and the Lord of the Eternal Night handed her a black bottle. The two looked at each other, and the next moment, a black vortex was born behind the black-haired man. The black-haired man controlled Zhang Zizai and was about to enter the vortex. "Don't go," the God King and the Holy Emperor took action directly. If he was allowed to take Zhang Zizai away, Zhang Zizai would probably be completely destroyed. "Get out!" The black-haired man turned around, waved his hand, and swept the 2 quasi-god kings away directly. The aftermath of the terrible power swept across the earth. With this place as the center of the circle, a fan-shaped area with a radius of 1,000 miles was destroyed. The 2 quasi-god kings were actually crushed like this. Zhang Zizai was stunned. This completely showed that this person's strength was likely to be a real God King. But, isn't there only one real God King in this land? Could it be true that, as Zhang Zizai estimated, there is more than one divine domain in this world? This would completely explain why no one here knows about the dragon sacrifice divine domain. He had hope for the dragon sacrifice divine domain in his heart, but the key was that the black-haired young man in front of him was very likely Ji Yingying's father. The black hole he cast was exactly the same as Ji Yingying's. He was the God King. How could he still be alive after killing his daughter? This was definitely a dead end. The development of the matter was a bit beyond Zhang Zizai's imagination. He now understood a little why the Lord of the Eternal Night Star was protecting Ji Yingying like this. It was clear that Ji Yingying was probably born to her and this black-haired man. Ji Yingying was not a descendant of the Star Lord. She was the daughter of the God King and the quasi-God King. If this was true, then this disaster was definitely too big. The black-haired man directly forced the 2 quasi-God kings to retreat, sneered, and turned away. No one can stop him in this world. Just when he was about to enter the black vortex, his hands were suddenly empty, which made his face change greatly. He had lost control of Zhang Zizai. When he turned back suddenly, in front of the two quasi-god kings, stood a tall young man. The young man was handsome and wise, with the aura of an emperor, and his eyes were full of strong oppression. He appeared silently like the black-haired man, as if he did not exist in this world, but at this time, he was holding Zhang Zizai, who was almost in despair just now. Zhang Zizai thought he was going to never come back, but life was even more exciting. He only felt a flash in front of his eyes. He thought he was taken away, but when he opened his eyes, he was almost in tears, because the person who controlled him next to him became the God King of the God Realm, who was exactly the same as his brother Zhang Junjian. The God King finally appeared. He could appear in an instant, in front of the black-haired man, and easily take Zhang Zizai away. This invisible display of strength has already made it clear that this is actually a battle between the God King and the man in black. Friend, according to the laws of the God Realm, you have no right to come to my territory and break in privately. I have the power to kill you. The God King smiled and squinted at the black-haired man. The black-haired man's face was extremely cold again, and his eyes trembled slightly. With his strength, he certainly knew that the God King would easily take Zhang Zizai away from him. What did this show? The Eternal Night Star Lord next to him also had some hatred in his eyes. Just a moment away, Zhang Zizai was safe again. She must feel bad. More than a decade ago, you broke in privately and seduced the beauty in my territory. I was too lazy to care about you and turned a blind eye to it. But you want to touch my people today. Believe it or not, I will let you give me an explanation. I am still single now. You come to steal my resources. Do you think I really won't chop you off? The God King continued to smile, but his smile was quite dangerous. The black-haired man's lips trembled several times, and finally said, the Dragon God King of the Sacrifice Dragon Divine Domain is really a peerless talent. It is indeed extraordinary. G admires him. The first 4 words he uttered directly made Zhang Zizai's heart surge. After coming to the Divine Domain, he finally heard the 4 words of the Sacrifice Dragon Divine Domain from Birao. It turns out that the Sacrifice Dragon Divine Domain really exists. God King, he is the Dragon God King of the Sacrifice Dragon Divine Domain. It turns out that his totem is also a kind of dragon. This has nothing to do with Zhang Junjian at all. After all, Zhang Junjian's totem is a unicorn. But the strange thing is, isn't the God King of this God realm now? Why does he have to be the Dragon God King of the Sacrifice Dragon God realm? This is probably the only doubtful part after being excited, but Zhang Zizai can almost predict that he is likely to go to the legendary Sacrifice Dragon God realm. The black-haired man looked at Zhang Zizai again, and suddenly had a clear look in his eyes, and said, how can this person have the potential of God? It turns out that he is the son of the Dragon God King. It is said that the Dragon God King was pursued by countless beauties but was unmoved. I didn't expect that he had an illegitimate child in the fiefdom. They look similar, and it is indeed easy to be misunderstood like this. Zhang Zizai almost fainted. If you want this Dragon God King to be your brother, it's still acceptable, but if it's your father, it's absolutely unbearable. What's your look? Don't make random guesses, okay, Zhang Zizai couldn't help but said. Stop thinking nonsense, I don't want such a cheap son. The Dragon God King curled his lips, looked at the black-haired God King again, and said, I know your identity, the Black Chen God King of the Galaxy God Realm, Ji Yuchen. Now I give you a serious warning, if you enter my fiefdom again, I will destroy your realm until you become a god. His warning was serious enough. After hearing this, the Black Chen God King's eyes were extremely gloomy. However, he had violated the law first. If he took action, he would not be able to act confidently even if he had a chance of winning. Moreover, in the confrontation just now, he obviously knew, I am unlikely to be the opponent of this Dragon God King. Don't see this man again. He's already this old. Don't be deceived. He has wives and descendants in the galaxy god realm. I don't know how many generations have been passed down. There are thousands of wives and concubines. Coming here to seduce you is just a picture. It's just something new, Dragon God King also said to Lord Yanjai. What? Star-Lord Yanjai took a step back and became even more sluggish. She looked at God King Hyken in disbelief, her eyes even more desperate. Don't believe him. Get out, Star-Lord Yanjai roared in despair. It's so bloody. Zhang Zizai covered his eyes. He simply couldn't stand it anymore. Just like the Dragon God King, this is a quasi-God King who has lived for tens of thousands of years. He can still be so bloody. Now this love, hate, and hatred are really shocking. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 950. The Black Chen God King took a deep look at the Dragon God King. He knew that he had retreated in the face of difficulty. At this time, there was no more, and he shuttled out of the black hole. When he disappeared, Zhang Zizai knew that this matter was finally over. It's over. He is safe. Although I experienced an incredible twists and turns and was so exciting that I was suffocated, the result was good. And now Zhang Zizai is in a very excited mood. That's because he knows about the relationship between the dragon sacrifice god's domain and his goal of going to the god's domain finally has hope. As soon as God King Hyken left, Lord Yanjai Star and others seemed to have no intention of arguing after the God King appeared. Lord Yanjai Star lowered his head and said, "I'll take my leave first. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow." After that, she left without waiting for the other gods. She was indeed in a miserable state today, but it was all her own fault. Zhang Zizai had no sympathy for her at all, and she was even the mastermind behind Lingxuan's bloodline. However, she did pay a price, losing her daughter, her reputation, and her bloody love. The people of Yanjai Xingai had to bid farewell to the God King one after another before they dared to retreat. After this time, they, Yanjai Xingai, may not even be able to raise their heads in the god's domain. Don't tell anyone about today's matter. After the people from Yanjai Xingai left, the Dragon God King ordered. Understood. The God King and the Holy Emperor led everyone to recall that the God King wanted to make the entire god's domain harmonious and free from war and chaos. Yanjai Xingai had already paid the price, and there was no need to add insult to injury and disrupt the stability of the entire god's domain. Zhang Zizai was too lazy to pursue the matter further. After it was over, the God King stood in front of him, looked at it a few times, and said, "It's really good that you can survive this kind of disaster. God's potential proves that you are gifted with transcendence, but potential is ultimately potential, not strength, so in the future road, we also need to guard against arrogance and impetuosity." Yes, God King Zhang Zizai nodded, he understood this very well. What about divine potential? For example, the God King Hyken can let himself die at any time. If he just decides and doesn't want to slowly torture himself, then he is already dead and his divine potential is of no use. Next, slowly think about the true path of ancient god cultivation. You still have a long way to go. When Lu Dingxing and Suqianyu become gods, I will officially change the environment for you and let you go to the real test. There is a place to hone yourself, the God King ordered. He is more serious now, and every word he speaks carries weight. It turns out that he wanted to wait for the three of them to become gods before making formal arrangements. Maybe for him, talents without becoming gods are not complete. They are like babies that have not been weaned. They will definitely not be able to take them out of. God King, are you taking us to the dragon god realm? Zhang Zizai suddenly asked. Oh? Do you know about dragon sacrifice god realm? God King asked curiously. I just heard from that God King that you are the dragon god king of the dragon god realm. That's why I guessed like this, Zhang Zizai said. You are quite smart. Yes, I am considering taking you to the dragon sacrifice god realm for development. That is the real god realm, God King said. I want to know about the dragon sacrifice god realm, the God King Zhangzai said simply and straightforwardly. Let everyone be with you. When you all become gods, I will come to pick you up. Remember what I told you, God King said. Understood. Zhangzai nodded seriously. When he looked up, the God King had disappeared. As expected, he was really elusive. Before that, 11 and Shenjun had asked others to come out of the glazed pagoda, and now everyone looked at each other in shock. Dad, what is the dragon sacrifice domain? Even Suyuexi didn't know. She remembered Zhangzai asking her. The King of Gods looked at it, and found that many of them didn't know. They looked at him with some doubts, and he also had a headache, and said, the King of Gods usually doesn't let me do things in other divine realms. It's because of the prohibition of the dragon sacrifice god realm. The people of the major divine realms know about the dragon sacrifice realm, but he asked me to explain it today, so I will do it, but none of you can spread it, and of course no one will believe it. No wonder even many divine kings don't know about the dragon sacrifice god realm. It turns out that there is a ban on the dragon sacrifice god realm. It seems that the dragon sacrifice god realm has a very strong authority, but I don't know why the people of the god realm are not informed about the dragon sacrifice god realm. In the curious and eager eyes of everyone, King Dushan said, people all think that our divine domain is the pinnacle of the entire world, and the many totem worlds governed by the divine domain are the entire world. In fact, this is not the case. This world is far better than yours, much bigger than expected. Now everyone has guessed it, so this sentence is basically nonsense. Just listening to him, some of the divine kings still felt a little suffocated, such as Duan Mulian, who was far away from the core of the divine realm. When Zhangzai asked him for the first time, he didn't even know about the dragon sacrifice divine realm. Even Duan Mulian didn't know how strict the prohibition on worshipping the dragon god realm was. It is estimated that not many people in the entire god realm knew about it. But now, the God King seems to be less strict. I don't know what has changed. Our God's domain is called God's domain. The totem world is endless. In fact, there are many God's domains. God's domains are generally ruled by one or several God Kings to maintain order. Our God's domain, together with more than 100 other God's domains, belongs to the jurisdiction of Sacrificial Dragon God. Sacrificial Dragon God's domain is the real God's domain. There are still many mortals in the God's domain, but there are almost no mortals in the Sacrificial Dragon God's domain. It is a place where ancient gods are the most basic and a truly vast God's domain. Our God's domain can only be regarded as a part of the Sacrificial Dragon God's domain. It turns out that the gap between the God's domain and the Sacrificial Dragon God's domain is so big. Countless totem worlds belong to one God's domain, and hundreds of God's domains are actually the edge of the Sacrificial Dragon God's domain. The Sacrificial Dragon God's domain is the real God's domain of the ancient gods in the legend. There must be a lot of strong people there, right? Sukyanyu asked yearningly. Of course there are so many of them. With my level, I am just a mid-level person there. There are many real God Kings there, and there are even beings higher than God Kings. People call them the saints among gods, also called gods, eternal and immortal beings. Even the King of all gods yearned for that place, but he also had a little awe, because it was not a place he could control. All living things originated from the real God realm. After reproduction and fighting, the inferior ones moved to the God realm and were eliminated here, and then continued to reproduce and fight. The even inferior ones were eliminated to the totem world. After countless years, there was a real situation. So in fact, our ancestors, tracing back countless generations ago, actually came from the real God realm. King of all gods said. Isn't that person from the dragon sacrifice God realm? It seems to be called the Galaxy God Realm. Is that the same God Realm as ours? Duanmulian asked. That's right. The Galaxy God Realm and the Dragon Sacrifice God Realm are both real God Realms, and both belong to one of the 49 God Realms. King of all gods said. Duanmulian was stunned. You mean, there are 49 divine realms as large as the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm? Yes. Everyone was dumbfounded. How many divine realms and totem worlds would that be? Everyone was speechless. The answer is that there are countless and endless, and the number of sentient beings is a terrifying number that no one can count, so you should know how insignificant you are. Yes. Zhang Zizai was frightened by his own insignificance. Preview, the next volume Supreme Dragon Clan. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 951. Zhang Zizai came from the Totem world. He was not like Suyuexi and the others, who had no idea about the Totem world. For Suyuexi and the others, they thought that the God's domain was just the foundation. Hundreds of God's domains surrounded a large God's domain. There were a total of 49 large God's domains, which was shocking enough for them. The talents of the God's domain did not climb up from the Totem world through the God's domain well, so they did not know the concept of the Totem world. The Totem world is not just a number, but a world inhabited by billions of sentient beings ruled by countless people such as the Holy Dragon Emperor and the First Sun God. The God's domain is above the Totem world. I used to think that the God's domain was the end of the world, but now I know that it is not. 49 God's domains, hundreds of God's domains were born around them, and countless Totem worlds were reborn. The Totem worlds and God's domains were connected by the God's domain well. In fact, the 49 God's domains are very strict to the outside world. Not everyone can go there. If you want to go there, you must be introduced by the God King. Anyway, I have never been there, the King of Gods said. This is the rule of the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm. It's not that he is not strong enough, but he has no roots in the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm. If you want to step into the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm from the Divine Realm, you basically have to be a genius. It should be because of this that the three of them were chosen by the God King. After all, they really have the possibility of competing with the young people in the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm, Duanmulian said. Regarding the various things in the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm, the God King was not convenient to reveal too much. Everyone was still asking more details, so he said, you just need to know it roughly, don't make it public, don't ask in detail. Anyway, it has nothing to do with you. The ones who really have a relationship should be Zhang Zizai and the three of them. Next, everyone may need to separate. Seeing that Zhang Zizai has become a god, Lu Dingxing and Suqinyu certainly don't want to drag their feet, and they are ready to return to the Daimo sect and Wang Chuan Sword Tomb to sprint to the ancient god realm. When they can go to the Dragon Sacrifice Divine Realm depends on the two of them. Zhang Zizai couldn't wait to go to the Dragon Sacrifice domain to meet that person, so before leaving, he urged the two of them to hurry up. For Zhang Zizai's happiness, they were of course ready to sacrifice their lives. Duanmulian, Tai Erjianjun and others said goodbye to Zhang Zizai and returned with Lu Dingxing and others. In the corner, Shen Xiao quietly asked Ling Xian, will you come with me to the Holy Emperor Gate from now on? Unexpectedly, Ling Xian shook her head slightly and said, sister, I want to follow him. Shen Xiao's eyes darkened. She had already made plans for the two sisters to practice together, but her heart was not here. Okay, I'll go to the God King Palace to play for a while, and wait until you have seen enough of him, and then go with sister. Shen Xiao pouted and glared at Zhang Zizai. She must have known in her heart that this time, he had completely taken Yanna's heart away. The Holy Emperor had no choice but to say goodbye to everyone and return to the Holy Emperor Gate alone. The King of the Gods led them back to the King of the Gods' palace. Their elders told them not to go out during this period of time, so as to avoid being secretly retaliated by the people of the Eternal Night Star Sea, and they basically left. For Zhang Zizai at this moment, the King of the Gods could not do much. The Dragon King would control his future for him. After becoming a god, it is the real beginning of the road of cultivation. Always remember that you are just at the starting point. The potential of a god is not the capital for your pride and complacency, the King of the Gods said. I understand, Zhang Zizai nodded. The King of the Gods was indeed good. Shen Xiao and Ling Xian were both with him, so he dared to bring them to the Misty Rain Tower and live with him. Anyway, the Misty Rain Tower is very big, and there are usually no people coming. The two of them went to rest, leaving Zhang Zizai and Suyuexi. Seeing that she was a little depressed, Zhang Zizai asked, "What's wrong with you?" "Because I became a god, you are not my opponent, so you feel ashamed." Suyuexi pursed her lips and said nothing, obviously in a bad mood. "Don't you want me to go to the dragon sacrifice domain?" Zhang Zizai asked. She pouted, walked up, gently pulled Zhang Zizai's collar, lowered her head, and said, "I know you want to go find her, but I feel bad when I think I won't see you again." She was not joking, but was sincere. Zhang Zizai patted her shoulders and said, "No one can see you again. I don't know how long I can go. As long as there is fate, we can always see each other again. Besides, the God King will probably just take me there for further study for a period of time, and I may be thrown back soon." "You won't, you are a person who shines wherever you go," Suyuexi said. "I'm embarrassed to be so exaggerated. In fact, I am a person who has nothing good except handsome appearance," Zhang Zizai said distressedly. "You think too much. You are good in everything except ugly." Suyuexi burst into tears and laughed, disdainfully. Zhang Zizai also laughed and said, "How can I make you feel amorous when I am so ugly?" Shameless, she pinched Zhang Zizai's face and said, "You are so thick-skinned. I don't know how many beauties you will hook up with when you arrive at the dragon sacrifice divine domain. This is my goal. When the time comes, I will build a harem and let you be a concubine," Zhang Zizai said. "Shameless. I immediately lost interest in you. You stay alone in your empty room. I'm going to play with those two sisters. Let's talk about your shamelessness together." Suyuexi's mood suddenly improved, and she jumped and went. It is impossible for her to follow Zhang Zizai, because she is the daughter of the God King of the city, and she will need to shoulder the task of inheriting the God King Palace in the future. The dragon sacrifice realm was a place in her destiny that she could never dream of from now on. Zhang Zizai has become a god, so his main yearning for the dragon sacrifice god realm actually comes from the 9 Immortals. Finally finding the final clue, he was actually filled with excitement. With such good news, he wanted to talk to Lingdang as soon as possible. While Suyuexi, Shen Xiao and the others were whispering together, Zhang Zizai was leaving the God King's palace to bring his daughter and sister in. Although the King of the Gods had ordered not to wander around, Suyuexi didn't care about him. Zhang Zizai was actually just going out to show off. Shen Xiao and the others knew it well. Sure enough, just half the time later, Zhang Zizai was holding an eccentric person. "Girl," she took the gentle and dignified Zhang Yanning and came to Zheng in the Yanyu Tower. Finally leaving the evolutionary world, Belle liberated her sex, especially after hearing the clues to find her mother. She was now jumping up and down. "Another beautiful aunt, do you like my dad too?" She saw Suyuexi and stared at him with big eyes. Suyuexi's face was slightly red. Facing such a girl, she was suddenly nervous and at a loss. Please bookmark this site to read the latest. Holy Dragon Totem. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 952. Hush. Lingling leaned close to her ear and said, "Don't lie to my father. He is good at coaxing girls. In fact, he is really bad. He is looking for my mother. There are beautiful women around him. It is not loyal at first glance. Don't mess around. Zhang Zizai hurriedly took the girl away, really afraid that he would not mess around. In any case, Lingling and the others stayed in Yanyu Tower. Not long after, Ruyu also came back. She heard that it was because Lu Dingxing had entered the Daimo purgatory of Liangmo sect to test in order to become a god. Regardless of whether he can become a god, Ruyu has no need to stay with him, so she came back to reunite with Zhang Zizai first. Now Zhang Zizai has made her and Zhang Yuning both have god-level totems. Although the two are not as good as Zhang Zizai, they are top talents in any totem world. No matter how lazy they are, they have now cultivated to the source realm. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow diamond suit. Is Daimo Purgatory dangerous? Zhang Zizai asked. He's fine. You show him the way and he'll know how to get there, Ruyu said indifferently. It seems that she is not worried about Lu Dingxing at all. He has such a hard time talking. How do you usually communicate with him? Zhang Zizai asked curiously. We are so close that we don't need words, Zhang Yuning smiled. Humph, Ruyu was actually still shy. Don't bother her. What about you? Zhang Zizai laughed at her. Daddy, you bully my aunt again. I'm going to beat you up. Just after she finished, Lingling rushed over to help Zhang Yuning tear Zhang Zizai's mouth. As expected, she was brought up by Zhang Yuning. As expected, she was on her side. In fact, Zhang Zizai did not take on the responsibility of a father well in his daughter's growth. He felt a little guilty, so he chose these times to play with her for a while. At the same time, he should also accompany Suyuexi. She was still sad about the separation. Shen Xiao understood that she wanted to continue to stay in the god realm. She felt that the Holy Emperor was really good to her, so she wanted to go on here. This place was also suitable for her. Maybe one day, she could become an ancient god and a god lord here. She was not ambitious, of course, mainly because the Holy Emperor really valued her as a disciple. Her situation was the same as Suyuexi's. Both of them were unwilling to leave themselves. Of course, Zhang Zizai went to the dragon sacrifice god realm and had no capital to protect them. The only exception was Ling Xian. She could go wherever Zhang Zizai went. She just stayed in the evolution realm. Zhang Zizai was planning to take Lingdang to the dragon god realm. The only way was to let Lingdang stay in the evolution realm, so that Zhang Yuning and Ruyu would take care of Lingdang in the evolution realm. Since Ling Xian had no worries and was completely willing to live a lonely life, Zhang Zizai certainly agreed to her. After this life and death experience, she seemed to have changed a little, becoming more pure, as if she was a woman with no desires or demands, but she knew what she wanted. She wanted to stay with Zhang Zizai, longing for a day, maybe she could do something for him. Maybe this time would not come, but she did expect it. Suyanyu's Yanyu Tower finally became lively because of the existence of Lingdang. It was all in chaos. After this change, Suyanyu was very respectful to Zhang Zizai, but she still said, since you are going to leave, don't provoke my sister in the future. Anyway, without you, the world will still be peaceful. Okay, Zhang Zizai nodded. I didn't stop you before, but luckily nothing happened. From now on, you are not allowed to be intimate with my sister, so that you don't run away and leave a bastard, Suyanyu warned. It's unfair, Master. Zhang Zizai wanted to cry but had no tears. He clearly did nothing. Don't treat me as a fool. You are just a thing controlled by the lower body. Look at these women around you. Aren't they all in your pocket? Suyanyu said contemptuously. Including Master? In fact, in my eyes, Master is the most beautiful and the most feminine. Zhang Zizai laughed, his eyes were malicious. The fox's tail is exposed, right? Dare you touch me, Xuanhuan raised her eyebrows and provoked. Touch me if you want. Zhang Zizai approached and stretched out his big hand. Xuanhuan saw that he was serious, and her face suddenly turned red. In a hurry, she slapped Zhang Zizai out of Yanyu Tower with one palm, and I don't know how far he flew. What a daredevil, she was angry and laughed. In fact, she knew that this guy was joking with her, but his action just now seemed like he really wanted to hug her. Suddenly, she was nervous. Xuanhuan could only run away. After the disaster, Zhang Zizai lived in the Yanyu Tower, which was full of beautiful women, and his life was very comfortable. Because he felt that he owed Lingling something, he had been playing with her almost all these days, and finally let this girl have a place in her heart. Lingling misses her so much, misses her mother so much. Daddy, can you be faster? At night, the girl nestled in his arms, tears in her eyes. Okay, Zhang Zizai patted her gently and coaxed her to sleep. Under the moonlight, looking at his daughter's face, it seemed that she had a bit of the appearance of the 9 Immortals. Zhang Zizai's eyes suddenly turned red. He found that he missed her too. And it was a deep longing. In the memory, every moment of getting along was as wonderful as this. Is she okay? How is she now? Zhang Zizai began to imagine what her expression would be when she saw that he had brought the bell. He loved too deeply, so he had to grit his teeth and miss many beautiful girls he met, because so far, all those unforgettable things would never be repeated in this life. That night, looking at the sleeping elf in his arms, he thought a lot. Perhaps he made some changes to his definition of protection again. In the following days, he heard that Lu Dingxing was struggling in the Daimo Purgatory, and Xuanhuan also entered the trial of the sword prison in the Wangchuan sword tomb. The two of them were particularly hard-working, which seemed to give people great hope of becoming gods. With the help of inheritance, the difficulty of becoming gods would be much lower than that of Zhang Zizai. After becoming a god, Zhang Zizai occasionally stabilized his divine source, divine soul, and divine body, and he also began to accept the inheritance of the god of killing at the level of the god of God. In fact, after becoming a god, the inheritance of the god of killing that had been integrated into his own soul had gradually emerged. In addition to some help in cultivation perception, which laid the foundation for Zhang Zizai's future cultivation, he also began to practice the 2 god-level battle tactics inherited from the suicide god. Only the ancient god's source power and soul can perform the god-level battle tactics. All god-level battle tactics are said to be created by the God King and passed down through the ages. The god-level battle tactics can fully tap the power of each totem and the source of the god and the soul, which is not comparable to ordinary dry-level battle tactics. God-level battle tactics also have 3 grades of upper, middle and lower. Zhang Zizai has the potential of a god. He has a unique and extraordinary comprehension ability, so the God King suggested that he don't need insurance and directly think about the superior god-level battle tactics. The god-level battle tactics that come to commit suicide the inheritance of the god are the superior god-level battle tactics. Please bookmark this site to read the latest.